The world of the Late Bronze Age was a web of shining cities, proud kings, and restless seas. From the palaces of Mycenae to the temples of Egypt, from the cedar-scented harbors of Ugarit to the fortified heights of Hattusa, the great powers of the eastern Mediterranean believed themselves unshakable. Gold and lapis traveled along ancient roads, copper and tin crossed the waves to be forged into weapons that defended the might of empires. Treaties were sealed with royal marriages, and messages between kings crossed deserts and seas in the hands of trusted envoys. It was an age of wealth, of diplomacy, of order. And yet, within a single human lifetime, it all collapsed. Cities that had stood for centuries burned to the ground. Palaces fell silent, their halls choked with ash. Trade routes went dark, and writing itself disappeared from entire regions. The fall came not from one enemy, but from many: drought and famine, war and rebellion, the crash of trade, and the march of strangers from the sea. It was a storm so vast that no kingdom could stand against it. This is the story of that storm, and of how the Bronze Age world, rich, confident, and deeply interconnected, was undone. The summer sun burned high over the eastern Mediterranean, casting its light on a world that seemed eternal. In Mycenae, the palace walls gleamed white against the hills, their gates guarded by lions carved in stone. Far to the east, the ships of Ugarit bobbed in the harbor, their holds filled with copper from Cyprus, cedar from Lebanon, and spices from lands beyond the horizon. In the Hittite capital of Hattusa, scribes hurried through echoing halls, clay tablets tucked under their arms, carrying news from Egypt, Babylonia, and distant vassal cities. Trade flowed like blood through this interconnected body of civilizations. Caravans creaked along dusty roads. Messengers on horseback carried gilded letters from king to king, each beginning with the same formal address: "Brother, to my house." From the palace of Pharaoh Rameses III, the Nile's floods promised another year of plenty, and the granaries filled in the heat. No one yet knew that this glittering world was standing on the edge of a precipice. It began quietly. In the highlands of Anatolia, the rains faltered. A late frost bit into the crops. Shepherds returned with their flocks thin and sickly. Traders from the west reported strange unrest among the Aegean islands, ships robbed, harbors attacked under cover of darkness. In the Hittite archives, a scribe pressed a stylus into wet clay: "Our lands are dry. Our fields yield nothing. Send grain if you value our alliance." The message was sent to Ugarit, whose merchants had always been able to supply food from Egypt. But that year, the ships were late. Some never came at all. By the turn of the century, the rumors had grown teeth. Refugees began to appear on the coastlines, whole families in patched sails, bringing stories of burned villages and strangers who came from the sea in swift, high-prowed ships. These strangers were no ordinary pirates. They came in numbers too great for any one city to repel. They fought with bronze swords and long spears, and they traveled with their women and children, as if they sought not merely to plunder, but to take the land itself. Egyptian envoys called them sea peoples. In the north, the Hittites heard the same tales under different names. In Mycenae, the king's advisors spoke in low voices about fortifying the walls, about stockpiling grain and weapons. The seas that had once bound the kingdoms together now carried danger on every tide. The skies betrayed the land. Year after year, the rains failed. In the Levant, the wheat ripened too early and withered in the fields. In the valleys of Anatolia, farmers dug deep into the earth for water that never came. Ugarit's last king, Amurapi, sent desperate letters to the Hittite viceroy in Carchemish: "There is famine in my house. In our city we will all die of hunger if you do not send grain." Yet Carchemish was itself starving. Ships loaded with grain from Egypt could not risk the journey, the coasts were crawling with raiders, the harbors too dangerous to enter. And so, the cities turned inward, hoarding what little they had, guarding their gates against strangers. One warm autumn evening in 1180 BCE, the people of Ugarit saw lights on the horizon. At first, they thought them stars reflected on the water. But as the lights drew closer, the sound of drums carried over the waves. Ships, dozens of them, rowed hard toward the shore. By dawn, the city was in flames. Witnesses later told how the attackers swarmed over the harbor walls, cutting down guards and setting fire to warehouses. Scribes hurried to bury their tablets in clay jars, hoping they might survive even if the city did not. They never returned to retrieve them. In the smoking ruins, the carved stone gates stood silent, the harbor choked with wreckage. Ugarit, a city that had traded with the world for centuries, was gone in a single night. Word of Ugarit's destruction spread like ash on the wind. In Hattusa, the Hittite king called up his armies, but the empire was already strained. Its vassals rebelled, its borders buckled under attack, and the great capital was abandoned without a final battle. The Hittite scribes, who had once recorded every detail of royal life, fell silent forever. In Mycenae, the palaces burned. Some fires were set by foreign hands, others, perhaps, by the city's own people, weary of feeding a palace elite that could no longer protect them. Across the Aegean, once proud citadels became overgrown hills, their stones scattered and their names forgotten. Even Egypt, the ancient giant, felt the weight of the storm. The sea peoples came against them in vast fleets, their sails blotting out the horizon. At the mouth of the Nile, Ramesses III met them with chariots and archers. He claimed victory, and perhaps he truly drove them back, but Egypt's power waned in the years that followed. The treasury was drained, the granaries emptying. The fall of trade was as deadly as any sword. Without copper from Cyprus and tin from the east, there could be no bronze. Armies were forced to fight with old, worn weapons, or with hastily forged iron blades whose quality could not yet match the bronze they replaced. Chariot forces, the pride of kings, dwindled without the wealth to maintain them. The palace economies, which had survived for centuries on predictable flows of goods and tribute, collapsed when those flows stopped. In many places, writing vanished entirely, the scribal schools gone, their clay tablets crumbling in the dust. By 1100 BCE, the great powers were gone. The Hittite Empire existed only in memory. The Mycenaean kingdoms were silent, their people scattered into small villages. The cities of the Levant were smaller, poorer, often built atop the ruins of their predecessors. In Greece, generations would pass before writing returned. In the meantime, the stories of heroes and kings lived only in the mouths of poets, to be sung by firelight in halls far humbler than the palaces that had inspired them. And yet, from the ashes, new peoples rose. The Phoenicians rebuilt their harbors and took to the seas with renewed skill, creating a network of trade that stretched beyond the pillars of Heracles. In the hills of Canaan, small kingdoms took root. In Greece, the survivors forged new ways of living, and centuries later, their descendants would give rise to the classical world. The fall of the Bronze Age was not the end, only a transformation, brutal, sudden, and total, of a world that had seemed unshakable. The kings of that age might have believed their cities eternal, their alliances secure, their palaces untouchable. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. The fate of their world rested on fragile bonds, and when too many of those bonds broke at once, the whole system came crashing down. And so, in the space of a single lifetime, the Age of Bronze gave way to the Age of Iron, and the ancient order passed into legend. If you'd like, I can layer in character perspectives: a Hittite scribe watching Hattusa empty, a Mycenaean soldier on the walls at night, a Ugaritic merchant hiding his family during the final attack, to make this even more emotionally intense, almost like a historical novel told from multiple viewpoints. That would push the immersion to its fullest. Do you want me to take it to that level? Thank you so much for watching this journey into the fall of the Bronze Age civilizations. History reminds us that even the greatest empires can rise and fall, and that every ending opens the way for a new beginning. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share it with others who love history, and subscribe to the channel for more stories from the past that shaped our world today. Your support means a lot. It helps me keep creating and exploring history with you. Until next time, stay curious, and keep seeking the lessons the past has to offer.